Weather experts have warned that more than 50 million people in West Africa and the Sahel region may experience a food crisis between June and October this year. The warning came on Monday, and that was in Abuja during the seasonal forecasting workshop for agro-hydroclimatic characteristics of the rainy season for the Sahelian and Sudanian zones of West Africa and the Sahel 2024. He attributed the likely food crisis to insecurity, poor food production, and the late onset of rainfall. The group representative, Dr. Abdul, said the crisis could be addressed if countries in the region changed their food production system. Well, the Rise News analyst Dayo Sobowale joins us now to discuss what the weather experts forecast for food crisis in West Africa and discuss measures needed to ensure food security for the people. Good afternoon, Mr. Sobowale. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure being here as usual.
Even before this warning, we knew that we had a food crisis, more or less. And now that this is coming, what are your biggest concerns?
It's a forecast, thankfully. And when you have a forecast, you can plan to avoid a disaster. So it's quite welcome. But you see the irony of the visuals. You can see food, markets moving with food and all that. What they are warning about is that there's need to provide for a rainy day. And it's a scientific and measured way of doing that. And they have always done it. In many instances, governments have always heeded the warning. But the people resident along river banks and flood areas mostly don't heed the warning, hoping against hope that maybe this time around the water will not come this way. You see, the weather is not 100% predictable. That when it can change. And that is what all this climate clamor is all about. Before, some of us thought it was the scientists trying to dominate the world and railroad all of us in that direction. But then it is becoming very, very clear that the climate has either decided to be erratic or is being provoked by the actions of human beings living there. And that is why you have young people in Europe saying that the old should not steal their future from them. You get me? By using fossil fuel to heat up the energy so that they won't have a good future. It is a logical sequence of events. And see, science, meteorology, and the digital infrastructure is helping a lot to predict. But then nobody can play God. Science cannot match nature because nature takes its course. But when we have warnings, we should heed the warnings. That is what the meteorological people are trying to tell us. Let's leave it like that for now.
Absolutely. Now, when you look at the current food crisis that we find ourselves in Nigeria, a lot of it, a big part of it can be dated back to 2022 when we had those massive floods that affected a lot of our agricultural producing areas, our mechanized farms. You had farms like Olam Farms who contribute hugely to the production of rice that were hugely affected by those floods. And then, you look at that and then you look at Dubai and what we saw happening, just a week ago. Some people are estimating that the level of damage that happened with those floods is maybe up to $1 billion. Of course, we don't know. These are just estimates. But when you looked at images from Dubai just 2 or 3 days after the flood, it looked like it was back to business as usual. So my question is, do you think we are taking these forecasts and warnings seriously enough? And what are the safety nets that we need to put into place in order for private sector to be able to trigger assistance? Is it insurance in our agricultural produce and in our farms? Or, what are some of the ideas we can play with without relying on government for everything? Because clearly government has its hands full.
So you have hit the nail on the head yourself. We cannot absolutely forecast what will happen. You mentioned Dubai. You see what desert area. In fact, I remember the last time I went to Dubai, I saw that all the houses were so clean. So I asked the driver, why? He said, it doesn't rain. And then you see one rainfall, you see the disaster. That's the erratic nature. You know, I won't say nature is erratic, because nature may be God. You get yeah, it follows its own course. But then scientists, meteorologists know some issues that disturb the flow of the wind, the atmosphere, that something will burst. That was happened in Dubai. Luckily, they have money to repair. But in this part of the world, you see, mostly in the Sahel, which we are talking about, in the Sahel, some tragedies happen that are not even on record, because the resources are not there to monitor. The resources are not there to even evacuate or help. But you see, the scientists, the meteorologists are doing their best. For example, in Lagos State, in the other states, they've been warning since about 2 months now that this rainy season, these floods will likely go this way, so that people should evacuate. But some people, they have no means of living, they live in that place until the floods come. You know, Ogukwa in Ibadan. If you see the path of the Ogukwa during dry season, you know there is a river flowing through that place. But when the thing comes, to sweep everybody. And some people will say, well, they would rather die there than leave the place. It's like even in the US, when the hurricane, all these things are coming, they tell them, in fact, some people will carry gun and say, now we'll stay here. That, I will, just stubbornness. Yeah. People just ignore warnings. Human beings can be erratic. But you see, there's not much government can do against natural disasters. That is why we have our own Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disasters. That is a clean example of what we are talking about. But you see, it's the duty of government to secure its people. But there's not much, except to warn in case of floods and natural disaster, except to warn, and then to make sure that people heed the warning. You get me? Even though it is a democracy, people have their own right. But if government warns people, I think they should evacuate. If government is certain, and some people don't want to, they should evacuate. And then, of course, there should be relief. There should be relief. Now, we have forgotten something here now. On this looming food crisis, you have insecurity in the land. You mentioned some great example of good farming. But go to those places now, they can't enter the farms because of insecurity. And how did this insecurity come about? It's people looking for water and food, fleeing the Sahel from one area. Invariably, the Sahel cuts across the north of West Africa. So people rise from the desert, people looking for food, foraging, and government failure in many cases, create vacuum, and then these herdsmen who are harmed. And then, of course, they are given arms by people who want to take over control of power in those areas. Then they are creeping down, just like the Sahel. Naturally, is creeping down, draining, no vegetation. That's the Sahel. It drains vegetation, it comes down. People have no food, no water there, so people are coming down. So it's not a matter of evacuation now. It's a better, I think the ultimate solution is good governance, good welfareist governance that makes food security a priority so that people do not have to kill themselves in order to get food. As to floods and waterborne tragedies, there's not much you can do about it because that's the domain of nature. You can only use science to counter it or mitigate its consequences.
Mr. Sobowale, I want to go back to the point you just made a moment ago about the ultimate solution being good welfareist governance.
Right.
From the body language of this administration, do you see that, the good welfareist governance from this administration?
Actually, the president spoke just yesterday on counter-terrorism.
Yes.
I'm sure he understands this topic more than you and me. That for him to stay in power, he has to make sure people have food on the table and people are secure. The last thing I read before I came in here was that it was saying that they are defeating the terrorists because before they used to hoist their flags on terrorists, but now they don't hoist their flags, that they are fighting them. You see, the concern is manifested in this seminar going on in Abuja. It's on counter-terrorism. Counter-terrorism, I mean, at the root of it is this food something. An hungry man is an angry man. And you see, man will always look for food to survive. Okay? You look at survival series, you see these leopards and so on chasing his hunger. It's not sport. It's not sport. If he doesn't catch that and he has drained his energy, he can die of hunger. That's why you see them pursue their prey ferociously, and the prey to run for their life. So food security is a very, very important political goal for any government to pursue, including, of course, the Tinubu administration.
Absolutely. It's an issue of national security.
Yeah.
But when we look at it, I don't want to get too technical, but I hope we can somehow, unpack the conversation around our methods of farming. Because just a few months ago, as we were discussing the state of food production in Nigeria, I believe it was the Minister of Agriculture was emphasizing dry season farming, dry season. So we already know there's dry season farming and then there's wet season farming. But, surely enough should have been invested in dry season farming to build up the storehouses in case wet season doesn't provide anything. Or, are we getting the mechanization of agriculture right?
I think we have done that. I again refer to mechanized farming example. For example, in the north, there are so many, retired generals, starting from Obasanjo's time, they invested heavily in farming. They became billionaires through farming. But then, you farm, you must carry your product to the market, because it's from there that you get the resources to manage and farm more. But if security does not allow that, okay, except of course, the farmers become warlords themselves and pilot their, secure their goods to the consumers. But then that will create how do I put it now? A fractured state, not a stable state. So security is important, farming is important. Of course, respecting the seasons and the predictions of scientists, they all may fall this, but it's a social human phenomenon. It's not predictable, and you can't subject human beings to test tube analysis to know what they will do next time around, because human nature is there. So essentially, we must secure our environment, prepare for heeding the predictions of the scientists and the meteorologists, and warn our people to get out of the way of predictable floods, and to make sure that they comply, if by force if necessary. But then, season in, season out, all these scientists, that's their work. They predict, and invariably what they predict, come to pass, although the level and size of damage may vary. But the weather is constant, mostly. That's why we can all be here. Mostly, it's only when aberrations come in, aberrations and on totally unforeseen events coming, that scientists will, is further food for investigation for them, and do an analysis and give us predictions. And hopefully we'll hit the predictions and learn how to feed our people in time and on schedule.
Hopefully that will be the case. But now we'd like to thank you for your insight as always. Mr. Dayo Sobowale, thank you so much for joining us, Horizons Analyst. Thank you very much.